Hey, what's up, good people? It's Jay Ray, the co host of Q Points, and I wanted to come to you because there are two really important ways that you can support our show. One is by subscribing to it wherever you listen to or watch your podcasts. Q Points is pretty much everywhere. The other thing that you can do is you can visit us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on Podchaser, and you can leave us a star rating. Please rate us 5 stars because you know you love Q Points. And on Apple Podcasts and on Podchaser, you can actually leave us a written review. It's not required, but it really does help to spread the word about the show, and it helps people to discover it as they're looking for new podcasts to listen to. We're always appreciative of you supporting Q Points. We thank you so much for all that you've done for us so far, and enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, it's Jay Ray. Podcasting is not just a passion for me and DJ Sir Daniel. It's a way for us to educate and inspire. There are a number of podcasts doing that for children, and one of them is What's Poppin' Penny, a podcast created and written by Tony Kennedy and voted 2023's best podcast for children 3 and up and families by Common Sense Media. Penny is a preschooler who discovers that an ancestral poem holds the key to unlocking the magical secrets of a teddy bear passed down from her grandpa, which is filled with her family's history. Tune in to the upcoming 2024 Juneteenth What's Poppin' Penny special. The show will feature guest star Miss Betty Reed Soskin. Miss Betty was a well-known songwriter in the civil rights movement. She became the oldest national park ranger at the age of 85, and among her many honors and awards, President Barack Obama presented her with a presidential commemorative coin at the National Christmas Tree Lighting Ceremony in 2015. Subscribe to What's Poppin' Penny wherever you listen to your podcasts, and be sure to share the show with young people. They will be sure to have a good time. Peace.
Greetings and welcome back to a brand spanking new episode of Q Points Podcast. I am DJ Sir Daniel.
And my name is Jay Ray, sometimes known by my government as Johnny Ray Cornegay III. What's happening, folks?
Q Points Podcast is the #1 rated top podcast in the world, dropping the needle on Black music history. As Jay Ray said, we are here where we're ready to talk. First, let me just check in with you, Jay Ray. What's been going on? It's been a robust day, kind of day.
It has been a robust day. Let me just tell y'all, I have been going all day. It has been nonstop. Even when I thought I was going to have a break, nah, bruh. No, you're not going to have no break. So that's been going on. Facebook. Yo, shout out to folks who are joining us on Facebook. Getting the show on Facebook tonight was like, it took forever. So I'm good. We're here. Everything is live. Shout out to all the folks joining us. Check in. Let us know where you joining us from. Sir Daniel, how are you?
I am fantastic. I, like you, have had a robust day. Felt like I was on the go. And, you know, sometimes, like you were saying, you're doing the absolute most and doing your best. And for some people, it's just not enough. Sometimes, and you know what? It'll probably never be enough for certain people. So what do? We keep on trucking. And I was just happy because I knew that later on I was going to be here with you, J. Ray, and all our viewers and listeners recording this new episode of Q Points Podcast, which is very near and dear to our heart because we were all at one point children.
Yeah, we were.
And at one point have had to participate in those Easter Sunday programs and Christmas plays, and got our, that's where we got our first little taste of what being on the stage was like.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about, there's some people who got that, but they took it to another level.
Yes.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about the kids music renaissance, as it were. But J Ray, before we do any of that, there's a new slow drag coming up in like a week or so, right?
We love
So
slow drag.
we love slow drag and we love slow jams. We love it so much that it is become our war cry for the year 2024 and beyond. So tell the people a little bit more about Slow Jams Can Heal Us.
Absolutely. So for those of you that don't know, this year Q Points launched our Slow Jams Can Heal Us campaign. We came out the box Valentine's Day with a conversation with Whitney Jones of Slow Drag. So make sure if you are in and around the Atlanta area, be sure to be following slowdrag.co because Whitney is amazing. She has a lot of dope events that is centering intimacy, slow jams, black folks, blue lights in the basement, all the things, right? So get into it. But in addition to the show about slow jams, we have merch. So you can shop our store and buy some Slow Jams Can Heal Us merch. Check it. It's Pride Month. Q Points got you. We even have Pride versions of Slow Jams Can Heal Us available. We got one with the brothers, we got one with the sisters. Buy what you want. We got mugs, we got bags, we got t-shirts, we got hoodies. We got you. Because you know what? Q Points loves y'all. You know what I'm saying, Sir Daniel? You know?
Absolutely, because we're not gonna play in your face like Target and Walmart and those places. We love y'all. We love us for real. So
We love us for real.
so we got the genuine artifacts, the genuine paraphernalia for Pride and beyond. So please make sure you go to our shop and purchase and get you something that is actually going to come back to the community when you purchase it. So boom, there's that on that.
There's that.
So Jerry, as usual, per usual, the social media has been on fire with lots of different comments. Stuff has been going on everywhere, but I think one of the moments that has really captivated the hearts and minds of viewers and listeners. Shout out to Mark McPherson. Just got back from Detroit. He's chilling at home
My second
in
home.
Columbus, Ohio. Thank you for always joining us. Mark is always there, and we appreciate you and love you. Thank you so much. Be like Mark.
Yes.
Be like Mark. Be faithful to Q Points because we're faithful to you.
Even in just getting ready for this show, it just brought up that question that I think we're all asking after watching the Nickelodeon thing of should kids even be allowed to be in this industry? Because when you look back, even just thinking about that New Edition documentary, it's like, oh my God, these kids were being put in such adult situations.
Precarious situations too, like drugs on the table.
Yes.
They were getting robbed for their money, not being paid, compensated fairly. Grown women coming on to them, that's a lot. And it makes you're absolutely right. Especially now in this climate, we're hyper vigilant about boundaries and vulnerable people being taken advantage of. This topic of child stars really makes you think, like, you think about their parents.
Yes.
We're going to move on from New Edition because there were parents before them, but you're talking about 5 boys from the projects.
Yes.
And if you know about the projects in the 80s, it wasn't nothing nice. The 80s, we're talking about Reaganomics, families devastated after the Vietnam War when all their fathers and uncles and everybody came back drug addicts and, just really terrible economics, Reaganomics, and people being put in jail for selling crack and being on crack. And so if your child has a glimmer of a chance to get you out of that, you're going to take it. And so it's like, on one hand, you can understand them putting their children in those situations, and on the second hand, it's like, could they have made better decisions? And I'm sure was it worth? That's the even better question. Was it worth it?
I think we need to unpack that a little bit as we go through this. And I want to add something because we don't have her on the list, but my frat brother Jason in the chat, when we get to our prototype, we must add Tracie Spencer because I have a lot to say. And I think Tracie Spencer gets to the thing that we're about to talk about. In fact, let's just launch into the prototypes because I think this is great. Thank you,
Mhm.
Jason, for bringing up Tracie because I just saw something where she talked about this very thing. But when we were thinking about this, Sir Daniel and I were talking like there there's tons of prototypes for like the type of stardom that we're talking about, and one of them that came to mind for the both of us, obviously Stevie Wonder is a legend,
Yes.
but we often forget that Stevie Wonder was a child star. He was little Stevie Wonder, and to clap your hands just a little bit louder and out there sing. Listen,
Mhm.
with that harmonica, and Stevie Wonder was on stage. So he was what, 12, 13 out here singing to these adults in the 60s. And even him having to transition from like child star to like adult star. There's a great story about the Where I'm Coming From album because it's like 1970. Stevie's like 20 years old. And he finally is like, I want to do my own thing. And Motown is giving him a little bit of room to like do his own thing, but they're not sure what is going to happen. And obviously, that record begins Stevie Wonder's classic period where he just was like banger after banger. And he was fortunately able to transition from child star to adult star. And that in itself is rare. Not
It's
everybody gets the luxury.
not everybody does it, and I think you know what the when it comes to making that transition, J Ray, you know what the biggest challenge or the biggest enemy to a lot of these child stars is? Hormones, puberty.
Because
When
they're
they're
set.
those when those voices change, baby, you don't know what you're gonna get when that voice changes. Like Michael Jackson,
Mhm.
well, an example of his voice, his gift being able to transcend his age, right?
Yes.
Even though people made fun of his speaking voice and all that, that
Michael was
singing
singing.
voice was still there, was still intact. Stevie Wonder got to keep his, but I'm thinking, who's somebody notable whose voice changed? Like Tevin Campbell. Tevin
Absolutely.
Campbell is, I think, is a great example. Tevin Campbell, because he was so young, was able to get up in those registers and to,
Mhm.
do his good Whitney Houston
Yep.
runs and singing like
Yes.
that. But as he got older, that changed a little bit. But I
Yeah.
not to the point where he didn't do well, because I still think, in his I'm Ready era, he sounded like super good. Voice changed and everything, but he sounded really nice.
Yeah.
But sometimes those are things that I think record labels, I'm sure back then, took into consideration or didn't take into consideration, like, oh, their voice is changing. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Menudo, if once your voice changed, you were
Oh,
out of the group.
they swapped you out and
They
put
swapped
another.
you out.
Absolutely. Yeah, the voice changing thing is such an interesting opportunity. I think that we're not talking about this artist in here because we've already done a whole show on her and she's kind of really in the upper ages, but Brandy's voice changing is kind of marvelous to I love 1994 14 Brandy, and I
Hmm.
love 2024
Husky.
Brandy too. That husky
Husky
deep.
Brandy.
I like all of that carrying on. So give me both versions and I'm good. But to that point, about 88 was an interesting year because
Excuse me.
88, when you and I were talking, 88 really did start kind of this new crop. One, New Jack Swing is everywhere.
Hmm.
You went from like kids here and there to like two artists showing up on the scene that were really young. So on one side you had Tracie Spencer,
Hmm.
right? And on the other side you had the boys, right? Both came out, debut albums, 88. Symptoms of True Love. You know, Tracie on that side and then Dial My Heart. The boys on the other side. You know what I mean? These kids making these bops. These kids was out here making bops in 88.
You know what? The boys bring back a specific memory for me. So remember I told you all about a Iesha that I went to school with. Well, there's another
you have
Iesha.
a couple Ieshas.
There's quite a few Ieshas in my class back in Hanson Place. Iesha Drake. When I tell you, shout out to Iesha Drake was the biggest Hakeem fan from the boys. So, to the point that we both would buy, take our allowances and buy Word Up magazine, all the kiddie magazines, right? Word Up, Right On, Black Beat, all of that, Rap City, everything. We purchased those. It was to the point where if I was looking through my magazine, I would let them go through my magazine. If there was a poster of the boys,
She wanted that.
It was up. It was like, boom. So, all right. So what we going to do here? She and I would actually swap posters. Like if there was a poster of Salt Pepper or Sweet Tea, somebody else that I wanted, we would swap posters. But if there was a Hakeem poster or a boys poster, what's up? Run that poster. Come on, let me get that. You know what's up.
It's like Garbage Pail Kids when you was a kid.
It was, yes, indeed. It was a serious thing, and those boys. Another memory unlocked, Jerry. The very first time that the boys performed on Showtime at the Apollo, everybody knows the world famous Showtime at the Apollo. Everybody knows
they turned it out.
They turned it out, but everybody knows about Miss Eva. Miss Eva, for those who may not remember, was this grown woman. We couldn't really tell how old Miss Eva was, but she was a grown woman, and she was at each and every recording of Showtime at the Apollo in the front. Now she is most known for showing her appreciation to the male performers by standing in front of them and gyrating, and she has been also known to touch them, like reach out and touch. She's gotten very close. She's very close to the danger zones, to that square area. Y'all know what I'm talking about, the crotch watch area, where she would put her hands dangerously close around there, because this was in the body roll gyrating era. So everybody was gyrating in front of Miss Eva, and she was out there to get her feels on television. J. Ray, I was so concerned at my early age, that when the boys got on there, I was like, is Miss Eva gonna try and feel on the boys? Is she gonna try and touch on them? And I was sitting there like with secondhand embarrassment, like, oh, please no, she's not gonna do this. And I'm only 12 and 13 years old, so I can only imagine what other people were thinking or feeling.
Yo, Miss Eva was the truth. And you know what? Shout out, interesting, the boys tidbit. Kipper Jones, friend of this show, singer-songwriter, our friend.
Yes.
Hakeem has a distinction because Hakeem was a very talented musician and producer. He actually went on to produce the boys like records after like that first album. Like there was a lot of Hakeem stuff. But anyway, outside of that group, Hakeem's first production was on Kipper's debut album, which was really dope. So I think it was Ordinary Story Part 2, Cut Me No Slack. If you go check it out, you can stream it. You will hear Hakeem at the beginning of this song talking on this track, and he actually produced the song. So that's like his first production, which is really dope.
Shout out to Hakeem for sure.
Yeah,
he did.
man.
I think he did like a couple Shanice rap remixes as well for the song from the Meteor Man, For You. For You.
I love that.
I believe he did a remix on that. I'll have to look. I have the 12-inch around here somewhere, but I'm sure he did. Yeah. But yeah, you're absolutely right about the boys, and bringing up Tracie Spencer also brought up another point. We were talking about for young men, their voices changing can make or break their career. But for young women, for girls transitioning into women, wow, a lot of factors come into play. Weight gain,
Yeah.
developing breasts and
Mm-hmm.
hips,
Mm-hmm.
and and now what do you do with all of this newfound male attention?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
how do you, I'm sure labels are like, how do we work around this? What are we going to do? Do we taper down? I want to say there was a story of somebody being taped down, if I'm not
That
mistaken.
is like that's so crazy, but it was the 80s and the 90s, so I'm not
Mm-hmm.
surprised. Well, I think you might be talking about Judy Garland. There's a Judy Garland story, I think, of when they did that with her. Who?
I'm thinking about, I'm probably thinking, no, I'm thinking about The Facts of Life. They did this with the
They
actresses
did they
as
did
well.
they did this with the actresses. So I do
Kim
think
Fields,
Kim
for sure.
Fields had this happen as well. You're right. Tracie Spencer is such an interesting case because she comes to us in 88 with her debut album. We get she's like 12. So she's like a
Mm-hmm.
kid, right? I like the boys, although the boys were interesting because they were like brothers. There was like the one real older brother, but then it was like kids.
Yes.
Um, Tracie was 12 years old, just kind of out front. She had done the Star Search circuit. She had been kind of around for a couple of years. She tells this interesting story because Tracie, those first two records, especially the second record, the Make a Difference record has Tender Kisses and Love Me, like these R&B classics on that second album. Then Tracie disappears for like 9 years, right? Until she shows back up and does the record in like 99. It's about you, it's all about you, not about me, was on that joint. She had the one hit. And here's what she talked about, going back to our initial part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
She talked about the fact that, well, by the time she did her third album, she's like mid to late 20s. Early on, her dad and her brothers would be with her all the time. She was never alone because her dad and her brothers were with her. So she could do radio, do tours, do stuff like that because she felt she had the protection of having her father or her brother. She said, but the difficulty came in. I think she talked about this on Questlove Supreme. The difficulty came in by that third album. She was like, I was grown. Her dad was sick. Her brothers had families now. She's now having to do this by herself. And now people start to try and take advantage of her because she's out there as a young woman by herself in this industry. And it was too, and she said, she called her mom, and her mom said, she's like, my mom always said, when it got to be too much, just stop and come home. And she's like,
Come
that's
on.
exactly what she did.
Wow. Yeah. Shout out to Tracie Spencer, Shanice. I
Mm-hmm.
think because
Another
Shanice may
child
have come
star,
out a few years before
86.
her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, wow. Yeah, when I think about, especially when we talked about New Edition earlier, we think about, of course, Maurice Starr,
Mm-hmm.
who is responsible for, you know, producing that record and putting them together. And Maurice Starr, of course, later on found New Kids on the Block. And so
Another kids group.
another phenomenal
Mm-hmm.
kids group. And shout out to I think it was Donnie Wahlberg. Shout out to him a few years ago saying, "Hey, listen, there wouldn't be any New Kids on the Block without New Edition."
Right.
So he got some cool points from me for that one,
Mm-hmm.
for saying, "Listen, there would be no us without them." But I think about Maurice Starr. I think about Michael Bivins. I think
Yes.
about Jermaine Dupri.
Dupree.
We got to
Yeah.
talk about Chris Stokes at some point.
We
But
gotta
these
talk about Chris Stokes at some point.
but these are procurers of kitty fandom, right?
Yes.
They had the Midas touch when it came to putting these kid groups together. And shout out to Michael Bivins coming from a kid group. And what does he do? one of his first discoveries. Wait, were they first?
I think
But
so.
I think they were one of the first discoveries from, I guess, the Biv 10 camp
The Bib 10
was
can. Yep.
another Bad Creation,
Yeah,
which
man.
was a landmark group for Atlanta in and of
Yes.
itself. And then on top of that, they were all elementary aged kids in this group singing about Iesha.
There's a couple of things. So the 90s, so this Another Bad Creation really did open the door, because while Sir Daniel and I were really thinking about this, it was like, okay, well, in the 80s it was kind of a here and there. In the 90s, you could throw a rock and hit like a popular kid or teen act. They were just everywhere.
Yep.
Another Bad Creation. I remember hearing one. I had never heard the name Iesha like on the radio, and like we never heard it in a song. It's just
You're
like
right.
I had a Iesha in my class, so of course we could sing Iesha. You got to make I'm sure she got tired of little boys singing that song to her.
Poor Ieshas across the nation.
Poor Ieshas. But you have these little kids singing songs that would appeal to other little kids. I didn't feel like Iesha was too grown. Even Playground comes is like, I don't know which song came first, but
Iesha was first.
Iesha was first, and then Playground.
So
these, right. They were cool. That was the name of the album. Cooling at the Playground, With these, let's talk about the fashion. These big clothes. There was some big, probably cross colors, hats.
Their thing was wearing their clothes inside out.
Theirs was inside out. So they weren't
because they were being fashioned after Belle Biv DeVoe.
Yes.
Rightly so, because Michael was in charge of them, and he was, of course, from the Biv and Belle Biv DeVoe. And so yes, they got all their fashion cues from Michael Bivins and BBD. And so that appealed to, I think I was what? Maybe 14 going on 15. So I'm getting in that area of where other kids, like little kids, aren't going to appeal to me anymore, right, because I'm getting up in age. But there was something I remembering like seeing them and what actually being bowled over by their dance moves, like how tight they were as a unit when it came to that dancing. And shout out to Michael Bivins and his producers. They always made sure those boys that their songs had a mean dance breakdown that they could show off.
Listen, we had to do it then. ABC, sadly, I don't remember the second record at all. They had a second record.
Again, the voice changes.
And honestly, by then, everything was moving so quickly. Hip hop was like swooping in and being in everything in a different way. But they were, they were just churn out. There were just more kid groups that were being churned out over time because, of course, from Another Bad Creation, we get Subway. A lot of folks, we forget about them, but we get Subway. We get 702 that came out of that camp too.
You know what? Who else we got out of that from Another Bad Creation? The Honey Dips. They recorded the answer to. They recorded the answer to Iesha. One of them was named Iesha.
See the things that come out of this.
The stuff that you forgot, Q Points is going to remember for you.
Absolutely. And so they really did open the floodgates in the 1990s because that album hit early 91.
What's the word, everybody? It's your man, Mr. Al Peter, Mr. Peterson's Neighborhood, and the MPN Network. And I'm here today to tell you about what the MPN Network consists of. The MPN Network is an entertainment as well as a developing media company based in Jacksonville, Florida. Our goal is to highlight various creatives that exist in spaces of music, visual arts, podcasting, and more. Within the network, we have multiple brands that will parallel with creatives, events, and other brands. The Neighborhood Podcast Network is a collective of independent podcast shows that has various topics ranging from the latest culture news, mental health, sports, and leisure conversations. We also have the Groove Suite brand that explores the realm of soul, hip-hop, R&B, funk, and more.
The Groove Suite.
Our health and beauty section gives a view on how to keep yourself in shape, in style, and in tune with your body and your mental. Last, we have the Fly Socks and Tees, an annual summer event that brings creatives together to celebrate the past years and victories that were received. So swing by our website, mpn-llc.com, and subscribe so you can stay up on what's happening with the neighbors and the groovers. Also follow us on our Facebook page as well as Instagram and Twitter, MPN Management. Building but becoming to the top.
One of the groups we mentioned in passing, Chris Stokes. We're going to focus on so much to say.
Let's focus on the music.
We're going to focus on the music. But Immature emerges, and they in 92 are very reminiscent of Another Bad Creation, except their thing was like this bohemian soul look thing. They kind of looked like little Lenny Kravitz's.
That is a perfect way to describe them. Yes, you're absolutely right.
They looked like little Lenny Kravitz's, except they were singing soul music. One of the things I figured out, Sir Daniel, because by the way, let's talk about the original lineup. So the original lineup of Immature, later known as IMX, was of course Marcus Houston, Romeo. We all know Romeo. So Jerome Jones, his name is went by Romeo. But the first member was Don Santos. He left the group in 93. He went by Half Pint. He was replaced by LDB, which most people know LDB because he's been in the group since. But one of the things I figured out, Sir Daniel, that was really interesting. So I only remembered 2 early Immature songs. I remembered the Munchies. I remembered that because that title was real fun. But 2, their first single was Tear It Up. Tear It Up, y'all go listen to this, has the exact same song structure as Ain't Too Proud to Beg by TLC. It's a very
I'm going to have to go back and listen to that.
Go listen to that, because I was like, listening to Tear It Up, I was like, this is basically the same production, which of course came out that same year. So that's very interesting how that production, I was looking to see if there was any overlap in producers, but it doesn't look like there was. But Immature, I remember my memory of them was seeing their music videos. I remember it being attached to Bebe's Kids. Shout out to that movie. And Tear It Up was, I think, on the Bebe's Kids soundtrack. And I remember the music video, and they just seemed so tiny, like, because they were kids.
And then the oversized clothes didn't help.
And the oversized clothes did not help. It made them look like miniature people. But I remember them showing up. I wasn't like a huge fan because I don't know what it was about Immature. I didn't have this feeling with Another Bad Creation, but maybe it's because it was a year prior. For me, Immature I felt like I was too old for that. You know,
absolutely. Yeah. I was like, I know.
I was I was probably like 13, 14. I was too old for that and what they were doing.
I know those kids, I remember them sitting on the couch of with Donnie Simpson on Video Soul, and their feet were they weren't even dangling. They were just sitting up straight on the sofa. That's how tiny they were. They were literally babies when they came into the industry. And it's so funny we're talking now. I brought up Video Soul, another memory unlocked. You remember Pretty in Pink? They were teenagers, but yeah.
Was it Malini was in that group?
Shaka
Malini
Khan's
Khan?
daughter.
Yeah. You actually they were definitely on Video Soul. I remember the Video Soul. Listen, BET played the heck out of some Pretty in Pink because they were on the top 20 several times.
Sure did.
And they only had the one single that I think was a hit.
Yep.
But I thought they could have gone further. But here's the interesting thing, and I think this is a good piece to talk about this. I think there was something about the culture in the early 90s, so between like 90 and 95, that allowed for these kids to kind of have these big splashes, but many of them just couldn't transition beyond it, right?
Right.
So there was an appetite for it, but it was like, as audiences, we kind of chewed them up and spit them out, or the industry themselves, like the kids at that point just got chewed up and spit out. And so before we knew it, they had a hit song and the album barely charted, and then we never heard from them again.
That's a fact. I think a child, what we saw a lot of was kid acts were attached to some type of gimmick. And
That's
once
it.
the gimmick ran out and was over with, then it was like, oh, now you want to really be taken seriously as a musician? Okay, kid, get out of here. Get and imagine being in hip hop, being a
Yeah.
rap group, and coming out like gangbusters,
Yes.
and then right as you're coming out, hip hop is maturing or growing up into its like teenager phase and troubled teenager phase, and leaning into the gangster rap era. And of course, we can't not talk about Kris Kross.
They were huge.
Another groundbreaking act for the city of Atlanta.
Yes.
Another bad creator. And what was so funny was I didn't even realize it. They were both from Atlanta, and Kris Kross came out dissing Another Bad Creation.
Yep.
Which I thought was hilarious. It's like, oh, you little kids. What you gonna do, those little boys? They're just kids.
To that point around the gimmick, although I do think of all these groups, I actually think Kris Kross could have gone further. And I did watch some of this, and we could talk about it. But they had the gimmick. They wore the clothes, so they wore the clothes backwards, right?
Because Inside Out is wiggity 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 whack. I mean,
we just so you know,
right.
So Jump becomes this monster hit. Their album, Sir Daniel, check it. Their album, Totally Crossed Out, which came out in 92, went 4 million copies. So 4 times platinum. This is huge. These are physical copies, people. These young people
had to sell records, people, and you had to go out and buy them.
Right. 4 million physical copies of a thing were sold. And that is huge. And they were, of course, a product that came from Jermaine Dupri's camp. And we love a JD. And by the time I enjoyed their second album, which in my mind came out years later, but that record came out a year after their first album. And if you look at them on the cover of the first album and on the cover of the second album, because they're like, we as kids who grow fast,
like 2 inches. Yes. Okay, prime example. Remember, J-Ray, when we would watch our favorite TV shows that had kids our age? And then all of us, Different Strokes. I'll never forget growing up watching Different Strokes, and they would go on hiatus and they would come back. Todd Bridges came back a whole man. He was like 6 feet tall with a mustache. His voice was in the basement. That happened on television. This is a prime example of what happens in the music industry. You're right. Kris Kross, they grew like 2 to 3 inches. They grew their hair. They were rocking the cornrows and braids because that was very reminiscent of Snoop and Naughty by Nature, who of course at this time like really were hip hop supreme
Yes.
beings at the time.
Yeah.
So, and I think they did a good job of matriculating through their age and getting with the sound of hip hop the way hip hop was. Part of that was they had the Brat writing for them, of course, and she was
Yeah.
a little bit older.
Mhm.
But I think they did a good job. They made some very credible hip hop songs at that time. Those two albums, you know, it was a far cry from them missing the bus and wearing their
Yeah.
clothes backwards. Remember that appearance on A Different World?
Oh, that's right. Yes.
In Dwayne's summer camp where he was teaching them in some class. But yeah, I think they did a good job. Jermaine Dupri, and we're going to talk about Jermaine later on in another segment, but Jermaine Dupri did an awesome job of working with youth culture.
Mhm.
I think he really hit his stride when he worked with Kris Kross, because of course he had Silk Times Leather, which got him his first record deal with Columbia. But then, you know, that Silk Times Leather did what they did, but they didn't really have as much impact as when Kris Kross came along.
Yeah.
And then, you know, Jermaine also had ties, of course, with TLC. He
Mhm.
did some production with them. And so, and they were adults, but they looked like kids because everybody was
Exactly.
short.
Yeah.
And then they were wearing the baggy
The
clothes.
baggy clothes.
So they looked like kids too.
Yep.
So they capitalized on kid nature and
Yeah.
kid culture and whatnot. So
Yeah.
shout out to Jermaine and rest in peace to Chris.
Chris. So it was Chris Smith who's alive, and it's
Uh-huh.
Chris Kelly.
Chris Kelly that has
Chris Kelly passed away.
transitioned years ago,
Yeah.
and which is really sad. I really wish he could have been around to see what everybody's doing, because I believe
Yeah.
Chris is I think he's a model or a photographer or something like
He's
that.
like a whole artist, like a visual
artist now.
artist now, and is
Yeah.
really always honoring his friends. Like Chris,
Mhm.
he's always said, Chris Kelly, that was my best friend, right?
Yep.
And what I love about, I actually think, Kris Kross could have gone further. I
Mhm.
appreciate that they stopped when they did. And Jermaine, I think, talked about this a bit. It was like hip hop just changed so much,
Yeah.
even though their third album went to number 15 on the pop charts, number 2 on the R&B charts, and went gold, which was their last album in 96. That is nothing to sneeze at.
At all.
That's a hit
At
record.
all.
So I feel like they could have kept going, but it was just like the time, and we've talked about this, that 96, 97 era, we've talked
Mhm.
about it time and time again. Rappers and artists, R&B artists who came before that were like, what do we do now? Because this is a totally different thing. And you either figure it out, and most didn't, they just kind of bowed out.
Yeah. And, you know, some people came along and went, you know, made their money, got their hits and dipped. We
Yeah,
had
who's a
people.
few? Yeah, who else we got? Because there was so many. We just
There
have
was
a
so
long
many.
list.
So remember the Youngsters out of Philly?
I do remember
They
the
were
Youngsters,
pretty
of
dope.
course. They were.
Illegal, also
Yep.
out of Philly.
Mhm.
Left Eye found them.
Yep.
What? Chia Lee,
Chia Lee, A+.
Shaheem, A+.
Okay. Quindon, Chris Stokes
Rest in
again.
peace.
Who rest in peace to Quindon. Real quick, Shaheem, I went back, y'all, and as I was getting ready for this, I played that first Shaheem record. Came out in 94. He was like 14. I still really like this album. It is a quintessential 1994 hip-hop album out of New York. It sounds like what hip-hop sounded like in 1994.
I'm sure there was a Keep It On The Real song.
I'm sure. Was there an On The Real song? Let me see.
On
Is
The
there
Real.
a... Right. I'm sure. I'm
Gotta
looking
be.
here. Or
'Cause
he
everybody
at
was on
least
The
said
Real.
it. Right. But On and On is still a joint, so y'all should go play On and On by Shaheem. I thought Shaheem had it Like, I really did think he could have gone further. But I will tell you what's crazy about this record. And if this was my child, I would say, oh, hell nah. He was cussing like all over this album as like a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And no. Because I remember Illegal was doing that too. I remember
The
that being
same
a
thing.
selling point.
Everybody was rough, rugged, and raw back then.
Yep.
And wearing their laced up Timbs and beefing with each other. And but funny enough about the cursing, remember Shantae was 14 when that record came out, and they had to bleep her a couple times too. So that's always kind of been a thing in hip hop. You know, you kind of gave the kids some leeway with that. Can't forget Sammy. Sammy started out as a
Yep.
youngster. Lil Bow Wow is
Lil
an
Bow Wow.
anomaly that
Yep.
we're talking about the 90s, but of course we can't not talk about child stars without talking about Bow Wow. For all intents and purposes, Bow Wow took what Jermaine was able to do with Kris Kross and the Brat and like take it to another level.
He did.
He did that. He did that. We make a lot of fun with him. We have a lot of fun with him recent years because, he's an adult trying to find his way in the world, and he makes some corny choices from time to time. But there's nothing that could take away from Bow Wow's greatness during his reign in hip hop. So shout out to Bow Wow. But I also want to, since we're still in the dog family, I want to give a shout out to the puppies. Hey, little mama, why you dress so funky? It's so funky. Why
so sad?
Now, clearly, that's a regional hit. If you from Florida, you know about the puppies.
We know the funky Y2C up north too.
Okay,
we heard the funky Y2C.
And the seminal and very serious Your Mama's on Crack Rock. Cannot forget that. But I want to shout out the puppies because they, for all intents and purposes, they really hit a mark, hit their mark in the market at such a young age. And being from Florida, because nobody was really checking for Florida except for 2 Live Crew, which I want to say rest in peace to brother Marquise, who just passed away.
Yes.
From 2 Live Crew. It's wow. Him and Tommy Wong, they're together again.
Yeah.
There's only Luke and Mixmaster Mike left from that crew. But yeah, but the puppies, I had to shout out the puppies. The puppies did their thing, and it's a song that we remember fondly. And of course, let's give another shout out since Rico Wade just passed away. We got to give a shout out to Mr.
Mr. was, I know I've told that story about the grandmom coming. I told it on our live. So actually the people on Q Points haven't heard that story. But yeah, there was a woman who came into Borders one day. I was working in the store, and she was like, my grandson was in a group and I want to see if I could get the album. And of course I have all the questions. I'm like, oh, okay, well, tell me a bit about the group, the cover. Do you know a song? I don't remember what triggered me to start like singing Blackberry Molasses. I'm sure she said something, but it was right. And one of her grandsons was in Mista, and I was able to order her. I was like, we don't have it in the store, but I can special order them for you. And I special ordered her like 2 or 3 copies of Mista's debut album, Mista's only album, which is a classic. If y'all have not heard that album, go listen to Mista's record. You can stream it. But shout out to the Dungeon family. Shout out to Organized Noise, and rest in peace to Rico Wade.
Well, J. Ray, let's let the people know we've held on to them long enough. We appreciate you all for checking us out.
Please stay connected to Q Points. Thank you so much for tuning in and always supporting us. We really appreciate y'all. If you are hearing our voices, if you are seeing our faces, you are doing the most important thing that you can do, and that's listening and watching. Please subscribe wherever you are. Just, hit a little thing wherever you are. And share the show with your friends, family, colleagues. If you love Q Points, chances are they will love Q Points too. That's the way it go. Visit our website, qpoints.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can read Q Points Mag. You can Do all the things over there. You can listen to all the shows. You can search things, see what you want to see. And last but not least, as we talked about at the top of the show, Slow Jams Can Heal Us and other merch is available in our store at store.qpoints.com. And we appreciate y'all.
We absolutely do. And what do I always say, J. Ray? In this life, you have a choice. You can either pick up the needle or you can let the record play. I am your candy boy, DJ Sir Daniel.
And I'm J. Ray, y'all.
And this is Q Points Podcast, dropping the needle on Black music history. We'll see you on the next go round. Peace.
Peace. And for those of you that want to come on over, we're about to go on over on the IG and have a little bit of a key. Come and hang out. We ain't going to be over there too long, but come and hang out over on the IG. We're going to have a key. All right, y'all. Peace.